Thank you, Madam Chair. First, Mr. Secretary, I want to thank you for your role in the Iran negotiations. There was an extraordinary article, I think it was in the New York Times recently, about the role the Department of Energy played in analyzing the various proposals.
The labs.
And it was, it strikes me as fortuitous in the extreme that at the moment we're entering into these particular negotiations, we have a nuclear physicist in charge of the Department of Energy. I want to go to an appalling chart on page 226 of the report. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. It's the differential in oil and natural gas prices between New England and the rest of the country. 2-7 is the number of the chart. This is an infrastructure problem, and I just think it's something, it's absolutely urgent for our region. We went into natural gas in a big way, as you know, starting in about the year 2000. Now 50 to 60% of our electricity comes from natural gas. A lot of people, like myself, switched to natural gas to heat our homes. Last winter, winter before last, we had the highest natural gas prices in the world. And this shows us at almost double the U.S. rate. So I just hope that the department can be aggressive and forward-leaning in helping the governors, the delegation, the utilities to solve this problem. It's a pipeline problem. It's not a gas problem, as you know. And I think it's going to take an all-of-the-above kind of strategy in terms of permitting and it's a really urgent problem for the region. I assume you agree with that problem.
Yes, in fact, the very first field hearings that we had for the QER were in New England, specifically driven by the gas pipeline issue. The representatives of all 6 governors were part of that meeting, and frankly, the remarks that they made were such that the governors felt that they kind of were going to have this under control would take care of it. In fact, I understand that next year, in 2016, there will be a substantial expansion of capacity taking gas from the Marcellus at least into the Boston area through there. But getting up farther north is a challenge. There, I don't know how this will turn out, and I'm happy to work with you, Senator King.
This is a problem of our system: is that we're either federal or state. We don't have regional entities, and I think this is a case where we're not asking for federal intervention, but we're asking for a federal quarterback in a sense. I think you can help to convene and move this process forward.
And we are happy to do that. Again, I think the issues for the southern part of New England look like they're coming under control probably next year. I don't know, but it'd be a good discussion. Well, there are discussions about getting Marcellus gas up to Canada, and that might provide an opportunity for moving gas from northern New England.
That brings me to my next question. There is a discussion about reversing the Maritimes and Northeast pipeline, which runs through eastern Maine from southern New England, from Massachusetts to Nova Scotia, reversing it and then exporting the natural gas from Canada, which would mean it would be technically not under the national interest review. I would hope that you would consider, as that project moves forward or the discussions, inserting a requirement that that gas be divertible during times of peak demand, rather than going to Canada, that there be some a provision that during peak demand it could be retained in the region. Just we can discuss this further, but I hope you'll think about that.
Well, there certainly will be a national interest determination.
Good, and I commend that issue to you. Quickly, I want to associate myself with the comments of Senator Heinrich about distributed energy and storage. I recently rewatched The Graduate, and the guy in that movie says plastics, famously plastics. I would say if it were today, he'd say storage, energy storage. That's going to be a huge issue. And I think one of the things you can do, and I think one of the troublesome issues here, and this is a national security issue, it seems to me, and it's also a sort of private rights, personal rights interest to have energy generated at your house. But the challenge is, what's the right number for the grid charge for backup and capacity? And it's got to be sufficient so that other ratepayers aren't bearing the cost, but it also can't be so high as to unreasonably burden this nascent development, which I think is very important. It's going to happen anyway. So I think another area where you could be very helpful to us is to have your smart people thinking about what would be the formula for determining a reasonable backup charge or a reasonable capacity, however you characterize it. And then finally, to really help us start thinking about, I think we got to get to the point of real-time, time-of-day metering, and there's great value to the grid if the solar is on at 4 in the afternoon. There's not so much value if it's 10 in the morning. How to figure out those kinds of issues so that the compensation to the homeowner is fair and reasonable, and also provides the proper incentives for that power being generated when we most need it.
Again, that's the whole issue of the valuation, which we need to look at desperately, and it's going to become more and more critical, including for what I would call especially maybe semi-rural areas that have a grid and distribution system, and yet if as people go perhaps off the grid because storage becomes useful, obviously that then spreads the cost over a smaller population, and it can be a real issue. So I think we have a real challenge as we look through what is an opportunity of the new technology possibilities, and yet the transition from our current model is going to have some real strains in the system. So
Thank you.
you know.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Again, thank you for your work on the Iran negotiation. Thank you, Madam Chair.